My name is Ava Collins, and sometimes even now, I still hear his voice. You're a burden, Ava. Get out. And never come back again. Funny how a sentence meant to destroy me still echoes in the quietest corners of my success. This morning, I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of my downtown Chicago office, the silk of my cream blouse brushing softly against my skin, the city glimmering beneath me like it was built to be mine. My coffee sat on the edge of my desk, still steaming, filling the room with its warm, familiar scent. Everything looked perfect. Everything felt earned. Everything except the part of me that still carried the memory of that night. My phone buzzed on the polished walnut desk, a sharp vibration that cut through the calm. I glanced at the screen, expecting a client or my assistant. But instead, the name blinking back at me tightened something inside my chest. Michael Collins. My husband, or the man who once was. For a moment, my breath caught, not because I wanted him back, but because I knew the universe didn't send reminders like this without meaning. After 3 years of silence, why now? I stepped closer to the window, pressing my fingertips to the cool glass, feeling the contrast of warmth on my back and cold ahead of me, the same balance my life had become. Why are you calling me now, Michael? I whispered to no one. Because whatever this was, it was going to pull me back to the night everything changed. 3 years ago, I wasn't standing in a glass office above Chicago. 3 years ago, I was standing in a dimly lit kitchen in a tiny rental house, clutching a chipped mug and praying the man I loved would look at me the way he used to, with warmth instead of disappointment. I remember the smell of overcooked pasta burning on the stove. I remember the heaviness in my chest that made it hard to breathe. But most of all, I remember the way Michael slammed the door behind him as he walked in, already irritated before he even saw me. Ava, did you pay the electric bill or not? He snapped, tossing his keys on the counter. I did, I said quietly. It's scheduled for tomorrow. Tomorrow? He spun toward me, laughter dripping with disbelief. You can't even handle something simple? God, you're such a burden. Why did I ever think you were ready to be a wife? His words hit harder than any shove could have. I felt my fingers trembling around the mug. I felt my throat tightening. But I kept holding everything inside, the way I always had. Michael, I'm trying, I whispered. That's the problem. You're always trying, never achieving. He stepped closer, expression cold, jaw tight. You know what? Just get out. Get out of my house. And don't come back. For a second, I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The pasta pot hissed behind me, steam rising like a ghost slipping between us. I set the mug down before it slipped from my shaking hands. And then I did the only thing I could do. I walked to the bedroom, grabbed a small duffel bag, and packed the little I owned. A pair of jeans, 2 shirts, my worn-out sneakers, and one thing that didn't belong to Michael at all. My grandmother's silver locket. Inside it was a tiny folded note she'd written when I was 16. When the world stops believing in you, don't forget who you are. I clutched it so tightly my knuckles went white. As I walked to the living room, Michael didn't even turn around. He just waved a dismissive hand. Close the door behind you. I didn't speak. I didn't cry, not yet. But when the night air hit my face, cold and sharp, the reality settled in. I had no money, no home, no plan, just the echo of a marriage that collapsed on top of me. Still, as I stepped into the streetlight, something inside me whispered, barely audible but stubborn. You're not done yet. And with nothing but a duffel bag and my grandmother's locket, I walked into the dark, toward whatever life was waiting for me. The first few months after leaving Michael were a blur of cold apartments, odd jobs, and long nights filled with self-doubt. I worked in cafes, did freelance graphic design, anything that would pay enough to keep me afloat. The world suddenly felt bigger and harsher, but strangely freer. No one was telling me I was a burden anymore. It was in one of those early nights, hunched over a laptop in a tiny studio apartment smelling faintly of coffee and rain, that I got an email from Claire Donovan, a seasoned creative director at a boutique marketing firm. She had seen a small portfolio I'd posted online and wanted to mentor me. That email changed everything. Claire didn't care about my past. She didn't ask why I had failed, or who had left me behind. She saw potential and grit. "Ava," she wrote, "talent like yours doesn't stay hidden. Let's bring it into the light." Under her guidance, I started learning skills I'd only dreamed of mastering: branding, copywriting, client negotiations. I burned the midnight oil repeatedly, my hands cramped from typing, my eyes dry from staring at screens. Some nights, I cried quietly, thinking about Michael's voice, the humiliation, the years of doubt I had swallowed. But I kept pushing forward, telling myself, I am not a burden. I am enough. My first big win came 6 months later. A client who had previously rejected my designs came back, praising my work and paying double what I had expected. The first check felt like a trophy, proof that I could survive, thrive, and grow entirely on my own. As months turned into years, I quietly amassed success. A few profitable contracts, a growing client base, a small team I trained and trusted. I moved into a modest, stylish loft overlooking the city, just enough to remind myself that I had built this life. And I kept Michael out of it entirely. Social media showed only snapshots of a life anyone could envy: coffee, work, sunsets. But the truth, the late nights, the deals I closed alone, the heartbreak that fueled my ambition, no one saw. Through it all, my grandmother's locket stayed around my neck, a constant reminder of my worth. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry anymore. It was a symbol of perseverance, resilience, and the woman I was becoming. By the time my old friends, and eventually Michael, thought of me as fragile and defeated, I had quietly built an empire that even I sometimes couldn't believe. And the most beautiful part? I hadn't needed him, hadn't needed anyone's approval to do it. Every time I closed a deal, every time I walked into my office and saw my name on the door, I felt that tiny voice from the locket whispering, "You're not done yet." It had become my mantra, my armor, my secret weapon. And soon, the world and Michael would see exactly who I had become. It happened sooner than I expected. One chilly Thursday afternoon, the lobby of my office buzzed with clients and assistants moving swiftly. I was reviewing a branding proposal, my coffee steaming gently beside me, when the receptionist's voice broke through. "Miss Collins, someone here to see you. They say it's urgent." I looked up, and there he was, Michael Collins. His eyes widened slightly, almost as if he didn't recognize the woman sitting behind the sleek mahogany desk, the woman whose tailored blazer and confident posture seemed to radiate authority. Behind him, a few other faces followed, acquaintances, family members who had whispered about my pitiful situation for years. I gestured toward the leather chairs, my expression calm, neutral. "Please have a seat." They hesitated, the air thick with expectation. I let them take it all in. My office was a careful reflection of the life I had built, elegant but not ostentatious, warm but commanding. Expensive abstract art hung on the walls, a polished bookshelf carried both awards and personal mementos, and my grandmother's silver locket glimmered subtly under the natural light pouring in from the floor-to-ceiling windows. Michael opened his mouth, probably ready to dismiss or mock. But he didn't. His gaze scanned every detail, every subtle sign of power and control. And then he looked at me. Really looked at me. Ava, his voice faltered, disbelief thick. I leaned back, allowing a beat to stretch between us. The silence was deliberate, heavy. Then I spoke, my tone steady, firm, but not cruel. "This," I said, gesturing around the office, "is the life I've built since the day you called me a burden and threw me out. Every late night, every small victory, every single challenge I faced alone, it led here." Michael swallowed hard. His face flushed, shame and astonishment warring in his eyes. I continued, softer now, but every word deliberate. "I run my own company, have clients across the country, and a team that respects and values me. I did this alone. No one held my hand. No one told me I was enough except myself and my grandmother, whose advice I carry with me every day." He looked away, guilt flickering across his features. A long, tense moment passed. The others in the room shifted uncomfortably, suddenly realizing the woman they had dismissed as fragile, dependent, or unsuccessful had become formidable. And then I leaned forward, locking eyes with Michael. Do you understand now what you lost? Not just a wife, but a woman capable of more than you ever imagined. His lips parted, searching for words, and he found none. For the first time, I felt a quiet satisfaction, not vengeance, not gloating, just the deep, unshakable validation that I had proven my worth. The words he had used to wound me had become the fuel for my ascent. And, in that moment, I knew the game had shifted. The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the city below. Michael's face was pale, and the others seemed unsure where to look. For years, I had imagined this moment, not with anger or revenge, but with clarity and control. Now that it was here, I realized just how much power I held. I rose from my chair, walking slowly toward the window, letting them take in the view, a symbol, subtle yet undeniable, of everything I had built on my own. You all came here expecting me to be struggling, weak, dependent. I began, my voice calm, deliberate. But that woman no longer exists. And I have a few conditions if you want any part of my life, or if you want me in yours at all. Michael's shoulders tensed. I didn't flinch. First, I said, turning to him, you will acknowledge the harm you caused, not with excuses, but with honesty. You will seek help for your toxic behavior and make amends, not just to me, but to anyone else you may have hurt. He swallowed hard, but nodded slightly. Second, I continued, addressing the others who had judged or doubted me, you will stop living vicariously through my life. Chase your own goals, own your mistakes, and grow. I will support you only if you take responsibility for your own success. A few heads bowed, shame and realization mingling in their expressions. Third, I said, my gaze returning to Michael, any further involvement with me will be on my terms. Respect my boundaries. Treat me as an equal, not a burden. And understand that forgiveness does not mean forgetting. It means learning, growing, and never repeating the past. I paused, letting each word land. This wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. Compassion without compromise. Firmness without malice. Finally, I took a step back, smiling softly, but with unmistakable authority. I care about you all in my own way, I said. But I will not bend to old patterns. I have spent too many years proving myself to the wrong people. From now on, I am only accountable to myself and those who are willing to meet me with honesty, respect, and effort. Michael looked down, unable to speak. I could see a flicker of understanding in his eyes, a painful recognition of the distance he had created between us, and the consequences of his actions. For the first time, I felt complete control over the narrative of my life. The burden he once accused me of being had transformed into my most powerful asset, the resilience, ambition, and independence he had tried to destroy. And as I stood there, framed by the golden light of the late afternoon sun, I realized that I was no longer the woman who left quietly. I was the woman who had risen quietly, and now, she was in command. The balance had shifted. The rules were mine. And it felt exquisite. In the days that followed, something unexpected happened. The people who once dismissed me, who once spoke over me, doubted me, or waited for me to fail, began to change. Not all at once, not perfectly, but change nonetheless. Michael started therapy. He sent a message a week later, short but honest. I'm learning. Not for us, but because I should have done it long ago. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The point wasn't reconciliation. It was responsibility. His family, who once pitied me, reached out with apologies that felt clumsy but sincere. A few even asked for guidance on their own dreams, careers, and goals. For the first time, I wasn't the one seeking approval. They were looking to me for direction, strength, vision. Life moved forward gently, steadily. One evening, as I closed my office early, the sunset draped the city in soft gold. I reached for my bag and felt the familiar cool touch of my grandmother's silver locket resting against my collarbone. I unclasped it slowly, letting it open in my palm. The The tiny handwritten note inside, the one that had carried me through nights of loneliness and moments of doubt, was worn now, edges slightly curled, ink fading but still legible. When the world stops believing in you, don't forget who you are. I ran my thumb across the fragile paper, feeling a warmth rise in my chest. She had believed in me before anyone else ever did. And now, standing in the glow of everything I had built, I finally believed in myself with that same steady certainty. I walked out of the building and into the cool breeze of early evening. The city lights flickered on one by one, like tiny affirmations whispered across the skyline. As I reached the sidewalk, I paused, letting the moment settle inside me. The pain I had endured, the nights I had cried silently, the woman I had fought to become. All of it had led me here, not to perfection, not to revenge,
but to peace.
Real peace. I closed the locket, holding it for one last heartbeat before letting it rest against my heart. Then, with a soft exhale and a small, knowing smile, I whispered the truth, the final line of the journey that had reshaped my entire life. I wasn't a burden. I was becoming. And for the first time, the world finally matched the woman I always knew I could be.